and welcome back to the Black Diamond Podcast, soon to be the 4 to 7 pod on the Ascension Podcast Network in affiliation with Middle Initial Podcast and friends. Now we are back to do the continuation of our all-time Nope season series.
We're going to have the heavy hitters tonight, I think.
Yep.
So people, there's a discussion every year about which league has the tougher playoff field. I think for my money, as we start the Nope season, this AL field is loaded.
Oh yeah. This AL field is loaded with a lot of talent or lack thereof. We will do the we will do the AL wildcard rounds, and then the National League division series. I am just pulling up the these teams now. We got two barn burners of matchups here in the AL. We have the 2023 Oakland Athletics, who the White Sox have a first round bye for their performance. The 2023 A's and the White Sox were kind of the inspiration behind this whole thing for me. So we got the 2023 A's versus the 2002 Devil Rays, and RIP Tropicana Fields, maybe. I mean, I don't know. That hurricane fucked it up pretty bad.
It's shocking that, I never thought of the fact that, it's fabric. But then I realized, the daylight actually gets through there. Of course. But then, to actually see that visual early Thursday morning, that was jarring. And
yeah.
You were the first person that even brought it up. Was I don't even know if it's going to be possible to play there with the amount of. First off, they've got to clean up. It's not just the fact that the roof got ripped off; it's all the rain that got in there, all the damage that's around the stadium, or the damage to the stadium. There's a lot of things that probably happened to that stadium Wednesday night that we haven't even really thought about that they've got to take care of. Never mind the fact that everything else around St. Pete's got to get cleaned up too. Are they going to have the time? Are they going to have the money to do that? Or are they going to consider it?
Yeah.
Are they going to even think we've got this ballpark open for 2-3 more years. Do we even really need to do this? Are they just going to play? There's been talk about them playing in Orlando at the Disney baseball complex, which they actually have played regular season games there before with this ownership. So it's possible.
Was that during COVID?
No, that actually happened while they were still the Devil Rays. The Stuart Sternberg group that took them over, that happened in 2005.
Mm-hmm.
They were playing games there in at least 2006 and 2007. They might have even done it in 2008 too. They made that a thing at Disney for a couple years. It would only be maybe for one regular season series, maybe two, but that is a wide enough. I mean, it's not as big as a standard major league ballpark, but it is big enough to where if they really wanted to do it, they could. So it's that, or are they going to play at their spring training park, which is about an hour south? What can they really do?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it was jarring to see all that. And especially for someone who, I've said it on here, I know it's not the best park, but it's a park that's 3 hours away from where I live. So I can go watch Major League Baseball.
And that's got to count for something. So this 2023 A's series against the 2002 Devil Rays, let's just say it's being played at a neutral site because Tropicana Field got wrecked by the hurricane, and Oakland Coliseum, as of a few weeks ago, is no longer in use for Major League Baseball either. They probably still got some debris to clean up from the field from fans lighting flares and throwing them.
Say nothing of the sewer system.
beer cans and shit. I actually threw a beer can at the field.
Oh,
it was like after the game. It didn't make it.
It's like, man, don't be braining a major leaguer.
Yeah, no, it didn't make it, but yeah, like we were sitting up in the rafters. Yeah, we were sitting up in the upper deck, and I was like, it was an empty beer, and I was like, yeah, I kind of just need to throw this like at the field. Like this is like the only chance I'm gonna have to do this.
I hope you had the good sense to yell yeet.
I did not yell yeet. I kind of just went and I kind of just like wound up and just chucked it. It kind of just hit like, it just kind of like, we were in like the 300s, so it kind of just hit like a seat in like the 200s. And that was it. We also like we actually broke a we actually broke a chair there. Like we were like jumping on it, and we got like the seat like loose, and we my friend almost got out of the Coliseum with it. So like first we had to get past like the first wave of security, which was like in our section. So like my friend's like carrying the seat, and then like the security guard's like, hey, like, and he just like dropped it. So then they grab the seat, and it's just kind of like chilling like on the ledge like by the security guard. And I was like walking like just like kind of walking out, and then I just kind of swooped and like grabbed it, and then the security guard just grabbed it back from me. He's like, no. And I was like, damn it, what do you mean that didn't work?
Well,
and then,
I appreciate the ingenuity and the thought, but also, how was that getting on the plane home?
Well, we didn't get the seat. I got some other things that I left at my girlfriend's house in California.
Fair enough.
Yeah, so I kind of just stashed some stuff there, and I'll be getting it eventually. But yeah, there was kind of no way I was gonna get on the plane with that stuff. Like,
yeah,
like I just
does not fit in the
all I had room. I didn't bring like a suitcase. I just brought my backpack, and all I had room for was like my clothes and stuff. So like I wasn't fitting any other stuff. So yeah, that stuff will have to wait. But yeah, and then like I walked down like I walked down the stairs, and then like I see my friend like grab the chair, and like the security guard like tried to like grab him, but like missed him, and like he just like ran away, and then the security guard gave up. But then like we were trying to get out of the stadium, and then like there was more security guards, and they were like, hey. So my friend just like threw it, and like that was it. I did get a piece of a garbage can though. But anyway, yeah. So that series will be
playing there next
on a
year.
neutral field. What's
There's
that?
supposed to be a soccer team playing there next year. I think in like the USL or one of the smaller American leagues. And the day of that, they were like, Oakland fans, we appreciate your passion and we understand. It'd be cool if you left some stuff for us for next year. Which, like,
yeah, there were actually messages like I was walking through like one of like the suites that they had up there, and they had like messages on like the screen that said like like, we ask that fans please refrain from like destroying or like stealing parts of like the Coliseum in these final games, like to ensure the safety of our players, fans, and staff.
Which I guess for the players, like that's got to be unnerving to know that's going on, and it's like the Texas Rangers didn't ask for this. Like the A's are on their schedule; they're just there.
Yeah, like they're just there because their job says they have to be there. Yeah, like
I remember people always talk about when the Browns left the first time, the players talked about like being on the sideline, and you have your back to the stands, and they're like, that sounds like a saw, and you turn around. And it was like people who were like season ticket holders were literally like sawing out their seats in the bleachers. Like, well, they're knocking this place down. The Browns aren't going to be here anymore. Screw that. I'm taking this with me. And people were literally like just cutting out the seats as the game was going on.
Yeah, I saw a guy when we got outside of the stadium, and we got outside of the stadium, and it was getting chippy between the civilians and the police officers at that game.
Oh, I believe that.
there was a lot of there was like a lot of people like talking shit to cops. But I saw a guy, he like hopped, I guess he like scaled like the wall of like the Oakland Coliseum, and he got out with like a set of like 2 chairs, and like he like started running down this hill, and like then I saw these cops just run after him, and he kind of just dropped the seats and just ran away. So I'm not sure if they got him or not, but like it's like, man, they're just gonna take these chairs and like put them in a dumpster. Like, come on.
That does remind me. I did go to a Devil Rays game at Disney. This was 2007. I actually saw a streaker. Now, not streaker. He was fully clothed, but ran on the field.
Guy
Actually beat the cops back out. Like, he was running around in left field, and everyone's looking around like, hey, this dude's been running for 10, 15 seconds. Where are they? And you can tell, like, these guys are just, they're there to work the baseball stadium when it's like travel ball tournaments and AAU and all that.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
They cannot catch this dude. And he hopped back over the left field fence there. And they kind of have like a berm in past the left field wall. And he ran up the berm and play had resumed, but everyone's like, all right, did they catch that guy? And you could see there was another fence the other side of the berm. He was scaling that. And it's like, that's the first time I've ever seen someone rush the field and actually not get the daylight's beaten out of him.
Or, like
out
not get
actually beat him.
Yeah, it was a welcome to the like you always talk about rookies and like their welcome to the show moment, or your welcome to the NFL moment, where you realize like, oh, like this isn't like what it used to be, this isn't like we're not in Kansas anymore or whatever. But like it was a welcome to the show moment for like the police officers and security guards that were working that game.
Is it I can't remember if it's Paul George or Jeff Teague. They do who was the first person in the league to bust your ass?
Yeah.
Those security guys have their answer.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm asshole busting my ass.
Yeah. But yeah, we got the 2023 A's and the against the 2002 Devil Rays being played in Disney World. Then we also got the 2003 Tigers versus the 2013 Astros. Let's start with the 2023 A's and the 2002 Devil Rays in the 5-game series. So
this is interesting to start with because I look at the 23 A's. Most of that team came back this year, and they were just regular bad.
Yeah.
Jay Langeliers was their catcher. He's turned into if he's not at least a league average starting catcher, he's an above average league starting catcher. Brent Rooker's on that team. We saw the jump he took this year. Like Zach Geloff.
Seth Brown's pretty solid. You have
Lawrence Butler. Lawrence Butler's in there. He's turned into a nice piece for the future.
Yeah.
Now their pitching is ghastly, but that lineup is something.
Yep. Yeah, they it's not a complete black hole of a lineup. So they do have these players that you mentioned. They're all kind of like, in like their mid 20s in 2023. So like, and like JJ Bleday as well. Like
Mason Miller debuted with this team, so he's there in the back end.
Yeah, so he's there in the back end.
Trevor May's like a decent closer. He was their closer for last year. He was good. You have Lucas Ursig, who was a highly sought after reliever at the deadline this year. Sam Hall was on a playoff roster this year. Like, so there's
some
pieces
talent
of a team in here.
And these are all guys who are like, and like these are all guys who are like kind of like entering the prime of their careers. Now looking at the 2002 Devil Rays, there's some talent on this team too. They had a very young Carl Crawford. This was I think this might have been the year Carl Crawford like got called up.
It should be. If he's 20, it had to be.
He was 20 years old and he played 63 games. So sounds to me like he was a call up. So you had rookie Carl Crawford who he only hit 2 home runs and he had 30 ribbies. 259
61 OPS for a 20-year-old.
Yeah, that's not bad.
Worse.
Yeah, that's not bad. And then you had Randy Wynn, who had he actually had like a pretty good year.
Yeah.
You had age 28, Randy Wynn. And then you had Aubrey Huff before he went all January 6th. He had a pretty good year that year. He had an 884 OPS, and he
Might have
hit
been radicalized
20,
here. I don't know.
yeah, he had 23 home runs. And then looking at so their pitching is their pitching is very food, and there are not too many names. Oh, they had Tanyan Sturts on this team. I hate Tanyan Sturts.
Fight night legend.
Yeah, they had Tanyan.
I don't know if people remember this because everyone remembers.
This team only had a 4-man rotation, it looks like.
Well, I think those were probably the only 4 guys that made at least 15 starts because I see former Met legend Jorge Sosa in here. He made 14 starts, but he's not listed amongst
so
like where you would normally have 5.
Yeah, so he did not quite make the cut.
Former Met legend Victor Zambrano was in the bullpen.
Oh yeah, Victor Zambrano.
I just want this on the record because I don't think people outside fandom know this. We didn't second guess the Scott Kazmir trade. We were first guessing that.
Yeah, that's not a hindsight.
No.
That's not a hindsight's 2020 situation. That is that is current eyesight 2020 type of thing.
But I don't think if people remember with Tanyan starts, everyone remembers Veritek shoving A-Rod. People, I think, forget from that brawl that Trot Nixon and David Ortiz tag team Tanyan Sturts in that fight.
They did.
Like, David Ortiz, I feel like I can't find the footage for this. David Ortiz definitely brandished a bat at some point during that brawl. I don't know if MLB's just had that wiped from the face of the earth, like that particular part of the fight. But Tanyan Sturts was very bad out of here.
Anything bad David Ortiz ever did, whether it was beating the shit out of somebody or doing steroids, anything he did that could be a blemish on his career, MLB has just completely turned a blind eye to and swept under the rug. Like, it's just interesting that, for him, none of the stuff he did was like an issue for like getting into the Hall of Fame. And it shouldn't have been. Like, David Ortiz should be a Hall of Famer, but it's just interesting that he kind of gets put on a pedestal by like the same people that like refuse to acknowledge like Barry Bonds because like of what he did and the fact that he like hurt the media's feelings.
Mm-hmm.
So I just had to get that out there. But looking at these this matchup, for me, I'm gonna have to go with just kind of, to me, like both teams are pretty horrendous, and I know that the A's lost a lot more games in the regular. The A's were a 49 win team, and the Rays, I guess, only played 161 games because they finished 103 and they finished 58 and 103.
Oh no, that's their Pythagorean.
Oh, that's their Pythagorean. Okay.
They did play 161 because it's 106.
Oh, yeah. Their actual record was 55 and 106. And the A's actual record was 50 and 112. So even though the Rays, the Tampa Bay Devil Rays, I should say, still had a better record, to me, the tie-breaking is kind of the pitching and the fact that the A's have like some semblance of like a starting pitcher and a bullpen.
Yeah.
That's like okay. And the Rays just don't have any of that. So for me, I think the 2002 Devil Rays are the team for me that advances and wins this series.
I agree. There was a reason why their story was so big when they made it in 2008 because for that first decade, like you would
part of it was exercising these demons we talked about.
It'd be like, okay, Carl Crawford looks good. Like, okay, there's BJ. Okay, there's little pieces of a team in here. But then you look at the other 6 or 7 guys out on the field, or you look at the bullpen and go, oh, there's still such a long way to go here. And I think this was probably the nadir of that. This was, if I remember correctly, I believe they got Delman Young with the number 1 pick the next year, which it didn't quite work out for him in Tampa, but that did lead to them getting Matt Garza. So that actually did kind of work.
Yeah.
Yeah, he did. Yep. Delman Young was the number 1 pick in 2003. And then they traded him for Matt Garza and Jason Bartlett, who were big reasons that they got to the World Series in 2008. So, yeah, I would agree. There's, again, you see a Randy Wynn and a Carl Crawford in here, and it's like, okay, there's some good hitters here. But then you also see Steve Cox getting 560 at-bats, Brent Abernathy getting 463, Jared Sandberg's getting 400 plate appearances. Like, there are some grisly numbers in 36-year-old Greg Vaughn had 250 at bats and he hit 163. This was bad.
Yeah. Yeah. So the Devil Rays advance. Congratulations to them. We'll see who their opponent ends up being. But we first have to finish the AL wildcard round with the 2003 Tigers and the 2013 Houston Astros.
Boy, this is a real toss-up here. You would think that the 03 Tigers would walk because they almost set the record, but this was the tanking Astros. So,
yep.
Although I do think it's worth mentioning here, does the fact that the Astros were tanking, does that affect? Now, I'd have to go back and look, but I don't remember, and tanking really wasn't a thing yet back in the 2000s. Like, if you were bad, you were bad.
Yeah.
But
tanking.
The Astros had a plan. We all knew that at the time. But you also look at this team. Chris Carter's at first base. He ended up leading the major leagues in home runs within 5 years of this. Jose
and
Altuve
he hit 29 that year.
Jonathan Villar played short. Jonathan Villar turned into, if not a valuable player, a useful player for a long time in this league. JD Martinez played 86 games for this team. Now, he wasn't the JD Martinez that we knew him to become, but he started out there. Marwin Gonzalez got time on this team. That's another one.
Yeah. This is the team with this was the team with zero hose.
The legendary LJ Hose.
Yeah.
Dallas Keuchel started 22 games for this team.
Yeah, Marwin Gonzalez was on this team.
Brad Peacock started 14 games for this team. So parts of the team that they ultimately became are here. So I wonder, now ultimately they were bad, but you can kind of outline something of a team in here.
Yeah, you can.
Now, also the same could be said of the 03 Tigers. Brandon Inge played 104 games for this team. Ended up being a damn good player for them. Ramon Santiago played 141 games for this team. He was on those late 2000s Tigers teams. Craig Monroe.
Dimitri Young.
Yeah, Dimitri Young's in there. Fun story about Dimitri Young that I know through my friend Tyler. It was one of my very best friends that I met through baseball and is also a Tiger fan. So he used to work with the Brevard County Manatees, but that also meant you would work spring training. And this was when the Nationals were here. And this was at the end of Dimitri Young's career. So they're taking the heights and weights that they have to send to Major League Baseball for the year. And this is the story Tyler's always said. So Dimitri Young gets on the scale at 313. And I forget who the Nationals GM was at the time. I don't think it was Mike Rizzo. It was whoever was before him. But he's right behind my friend Tyler, and he says, that's 299. And Tyler turns on and he goes, come on, are you serious? He goes, that's 299. He goes, if he was 301 or 302 short, he's not even close. Whoever the GM was like, we're not having the first 300-pound player. He's 299. He was 299.
Yeah, scale don't lie.
And now there's multiple 300-pound players in the league. This was less than 20 years later.
Yeah. Yeah, and a lot of those 300-pound players ended up Ended up being pretty good too.
Omar Infante's on here. Omar Infante ended up being on multiple. I know he was on the Royals World Series team. I think he was on the Tigers team that went back in 2012. I know he bounced around the league a little bit,
Yeah,
but
I
then
think
he
you're
came
right.
back. Like Jeremy Bonderman's on this team. Jeremy Bonderman, I think, legitimately was the second best pitcher after Verlander when they went in 06. Mike Maroth lost 20 games. I believe he's the last one to do it. Mike Maroth was on that 06 team. Like there's, again,
Yeah, like there were people.
team in here. Nate
Yeah,
Roberts.
there were seeds that were like planted.
Yeah,
in this season for them to go to the World Series in 2006.
I'll be damned. Fernando Rodney's in here. I do not believe it.
Fix your hat.
Unbelievable. How? Oh, AJ Hinch is in here. AJ Hinch was a 29-year-old catcher on this team. Who would have believed it?
Yep. Yeah. So for me, looking at these teams, to me, what it comes down to, and the reason why, for me, I think the Astros are the better team, and that the Tigers are the team to advance. And for me, again, it all comes down to the pitching. I think like you could pick out either of their lineup. I mean, shit, the Astros had like early days Altuve on that team. And he wasn't quite there yet. He wasn't like a superstar yet or anything. But he was on that team, and that was like kind of when he was 23. So like that was like
30 doubles, 30 steals. Like
yeah,
not quite a superstar yet, but good.
Yeah, very productive. Still very productive. Jose Altuve. JD Martinez. He wasn't the JD Martinez that we grew to know and love, but he was pretty productive. So you could pick out players from either lineup. But when you look at the pitching and the bullpen, like the Astros bullpen, in this season, they had some guys who put up some pretty decently good numbers. Like Jose Veras had a 2.93 ERA, and he had 19 saves. Probably would have had a lot more if he was on a better team. Wesley Wright, he had a ERA in the high threes. Every one of these pitchers that the Tigers had, both in their rotation and in their bullpen, it's a lot of food there. So for me, I think the Tigers take the cake. I think that I do think they are marginally worse than the 2013 Astros.
I would generally tend to agree with that because, again, it's like Dallas Keuchel's in there. He won the Cy Young 2 years later, actually, and went 6-10 here for a team that is as bad as they were. 6-10 with this bunch, like, not bad. Like Brad Peacock went 5-6. Brad Peacock, I think, only left the Astros like a year or two ago. Ended up being a very valuable piece for them. You got Bud Norris in here, who was a league average pitcher for a long time. You got 34-year-old Eric Bedard in here. There's also a guy in that bullpen, Josh Fields. I hope the Dodgers don't get any ideas a couple years from now and trade a DH for him. That would be bad.
Sure would be a shame.
Yeah.
That sure would be a shame.
And then hopefully they don't use Josh Fields in a World Series game against the Astros. That would be doubly bad.
Yeah.
They did.
Yeah, 2017 called. They want their trash cans back.
I don't think it was needed against Josh Fields.
No, it wasn't. They were probably using them on Josh Fields, but they didn't really need them for him. But yeah, I mean, this is an interesting matchup. I think the Tigers kind of by virtue of having no pitching, and by also the virtue of this is the team that lost now the third to most games in MLB history.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's kind of just got to default to them. The Astros did make it a little closer than you would have thought on paper, but I think ultimately, the Tigers advanced. But it is an interesting matchup in the sense that, both of these teams had seeds on them that were kind of planted for future World Series appearances and or wins.
And also remember, like the 03 Tigers very nearly broke the record. They had to get hot in the last week of the season just to avoid that.
Yeah, kind of like the White Sox kind of got hot in like the last week of the season just to avoid being even more historically embarrassing. Like, I didn't think they were even going to crack like 40 wins.
Yeah, if the Tigers weren't in preservation mode of, all right, let's get guys rested, that probably would have been at least 2 games worse.
Yeah. Yeah, and they very well could hold the crown for, the worst of the worst. But the 03 Tigers, we salute you. You are going to the ALDS of the Chris and Jerry Black Diamond Nope season. Now we go to the NLDS portion of the bracket. We got 2 barn burner matchups in this one. We got the 2023 Rockies and the 1962 New York Mets. And then we also have the 2002 Brewers and the 2004 Diamondbacks on the other side of the bracket. I'll leave it up to you. Which one should we do first?
Let's start with the 62 Mets first and going with the 23.
Just rip off the Band-Aid.
Yeah, because this one's interesting to me in terms of, because now we're comparing eras, because most of the other teams that are in this field have all been post 2000.
Yeah.
The 62 Mets are of a completely different time in baseball in terms of the way the game was played, how many teams there were, how you approach the game. Starting pitchers almost always went 9 back then, or you were expected to. So it's so interesting to me of,
what do you mean this team sucked? They had Frank Thomas.
Not that one.
No, I know. Yeah. It is interesting because you're getting into comparing different eras. Like, this was the first year of the Mets conception. And we kind of only included them. We were mostly including teams from our lifetimes that we at least vividly remember. But the fact that, we have, we had to show some love to, the fact that we are half a Mets podcast and half.
And they did have the record until
they did have the record they did have the record up until like 2 weeks ago. They went 40, 120, and 1. So they had 1 tie. Their Pythagorean theorem record was 50 and 110. So do you know anything about the tie?
I'll be honest, I never did until you mentioned it, because it never even gets said. It just always gets mentioned as 40 and 120. So to me, that's actually genuinely new information.
Yeah, I'm looking at a 1962 Mets tie game.
Anyway, we mentioned recently on the podcast that Ed Kranepool had passed, and I had mentioned he is an original Met. He debuted at 17 years old on this team. And
failing New York Times wants me to fucking pay to read this article about this tie baseball game from 1962. Yeah, no.
Should note, by the way, also on this team, a 38-year-old Gil Hodges. 5 years later, he was named the manager. 2 years later, the miracle happens. Yeah. Also, they had a 31-year-old baseman named Don Zimmer, and it was 21 years ago yesterday that our friend Don Zimmer learned the old lesson. I believe it says here, run up and get done up.
So Don Zimmer getting thrown into the ground by Pedro Martinez is now old enough to drink.
Yep.
God bless it.
Fall down.
All right, here's a little tidbit I got about this. So it was a game the game was played September 9th, 1962. This game had, and this is from ultimatemets.com.
I visited there.
Yeah, this game had just about everything except good pitching and a winner. The Colt 45s and Mets sent a total of 10 pitchers to the mound, 5 each. The game is halted at the end of 8 innings because of curfew. The curfew rule is no innings shall start after 7 p.m. on a Sunday night. When the game was called, each team had 7 runs, 10 hits, and 1 error. This was the final game scheduled between the two teams in Houston, which means next week they would attempt to play 6 games in 3 days due to earlier postponements. Only 3,630 people paid to attend this Sunday afternoon 90-degree game that lasted over 4 hours.
Ooh.
With only the individual statistics going into the record book. And it looks like it was called to a tie, basically because of they basically agreed to just not, I think they basically just agreed, like, with everything else.
And also the Colt 45s were an expansion team that year too. So this wasn't as if this game needed to be resumed for standing purposes. The Colt 45s weren't good either. So it's like, why do we need to go out of our way logistically to finish this game that's not going to matter to anybody?
Yeah, and it's like, it's just one blemish on the Mets record from that year.
And they'd already done enough losing. They're like, if we lose it, like, who cares?
We don't need 121st loss. And it was just like, there's, and as expansion, I'm sure like the logistics and everything were probably different for like 2 expansion franchises, like in the early 1960s.
I believe this was the first.
Probably would have been. It probably would have been like put a lot more of a dent in the pockets, to pay for like the travel to get back to like finish that game or whatever. So both parties agreed to just punt that game and end it as a
Major League when they're flying in the rickety plane through the thunderstorm. Like, that was just what every team flew in back then.
Yeah. So so looking at this matchup though, it's definitely interesting because it's 2 different eras, I guess you could call them different errors for the purpose of this segment. But you look at this 2023 Rockies team, and they definitely had some talent.
Yeah.
And they had some players that, the Rockies weren't good this year, but they weren't, they weren't as bad as this team. They were a lot better, and there were a lot of players on this team that, contributed to the Rockies being a better team, such as Brenton Doyle and Ryan McMahon, Ezekiel Tovar, Elias Diaz.
Profar is a wanted player.
Yeah. His head is wanted by fans of LA because he can't stop talking shit. You had the old man Chris Bryan on this team. So this 2023 Rockies team wasn't necessarily devoid of talent. Obviously, pitching's never going to be a strong suit for the Rockies, especially in the confines of Coors Field. And then looking at the Mets, I mean, it looks like Frank Thomas was actually the best player, like the best batter on this team.
He actually was good.
And like everyone in their starting rotation had like ERAs in the 4s, which is like actually not terrible now. Like I guess that probably looked a lot worse in the 60s. Like, ooh, you got an ERA in the 4s.
But it should also be noted,
you pitch 8 innings a game until the closer comes in, and then your ERA is in the 4s. Like, get the fuck out of here. Where now it's like, oh, your ERA is in the 4s. All right, like, we probably got to.
I mean, back then, like, if you had at
the end of their rotation,
back then, like, an ERA of 4 was kind of understood. Like, all 3 guys you mentioned with those, they all pitched at least 200 innings. And the number 4 starter that qualifies here through 143. So like they had something resembling a rotation. They weren't much use, but like they had a rotation that they knew could go out there Roger
Yeah,
Craig,
they
33
were
starts.
professionals, and they could eat.
Yeah.
They could eat runs and eat innings, and they could you could they could eat a bad outing for you.
Hey, like
They
Al
preserved the
Jackson had a
bullpen for they preserved the bullpen for those 40 wins that they desperately needed to, so that one day a team could surpass them as the worst in history.
they had 2 starters with 13 complete games, and they had another with 12. So like they had guys who would do it. Al Jackson went 8-20, but he had a FIP of 3.57. So that means he wasn't necessarily pitching all that bad. He just might not have had a lot of good defense, which I mean, I don't know exactly what the rules of the expansion draft were, because remember, this was the original expansion in baseball. I
Yeah,
think across all sports now, they have tried to be better about expansion drafts. And I think the leagues have realized, like, oh, yeah, we probably don't want our expansion teams to suck for the first 10 to 15 years of their existence. Let's try to help them out. Because you
yeah, it's
look up
not
and down this
exactly.
Met roster, there's a lot of 31, 32, 34. There's a little bit of youth in there, but it's mostly vets.
Yeah, yeah,
And
it's mostly old fellas.
you couldn't really build up your farm system as a franchise starting from scratch. Like, there was no chance that the Mets were. I'm sure they didn't rank farm systems back then, but I bet they didn't have a top 5 farm system at that point, because that's
No,
just not how it works. Like,
no.
I don't know if this influences the result, Chris, but I guess maybe from the idea of, I think everyone knew they would be bad because no one had seen expansion in baseball before that.
Yeah, yeah. So
there were the
they
franchises that were around. Now, a few of them moved, but they took those rosters with them. No one had seen this in forever. And to that fact, even today, if you ask people my parents' age that have seen the entire history of the Mets, they aren't. A lot of these other teams in this field are looked down upon. Like, oh God, we had to watch that team, and they were so bad. The 62 Mets are beloved. Like, when any one of those players passes, people are like, oh man, I remember him on the 62 Mets. Like, there is no shame attached to that franchise amongst the fan base whatsoever.
Yeah, it was yeah, it was year one of the existence, so it was kind of just like
People were just happy to have National League Baseball in New York again, because they'd gone almost a half decade without it.
yeah, so it was kind of like yeah, so it was kind of like a a team that for whatever reason they do get looked back on fondly. It was just kind of like they were kind of just everyone. It seemed like they were happy to be there, and like Mets fans were like just happy to have a team again. Whether it was displaced Dodgers fans or new people in Queens who wanted to get into baseball and wanted to embrace the fact that they had their own team and they didn't have to root for a team in Brooklyn or the Bronx or whatever other borough. So yeah, I guess maybe I think also the fact that like social media didn't exist during this time.
Yeah.
So there wasn't like that cloud of negativity that you get when you are a perennial loser in like the social media era, where there's memes, there's nasty comment sections, owners or general managers posting tone deaf statements about how terrible you were and basically being like, please come to our games. We're trying to make this better. Like the statement the White Sox released after their season.
Or even
You didn't really
the
have any of
Diamondbacks
that.
owner.
So, they kind of just had like guys that, most of them weren't very good, but you just had guys that were kind of just, they just kind of brought baseball to a place that didn't have it before. So, people were kind of just like embracing it and living with the results. But with that being said, and Ed Kranepool was on this team too. He was 17 years old,
Mm-hmm.
and he played in 3 games. With all that being said, though, I'm going with the 62 Mets as the team to advance here. I just think that you look at this, maybe there's some recency bias in the fact that there's a lot of recognizable names for me on this Rockies team, and players that weren't necessarily terrible in this season, and players that are, not necessarily bad now either, may have even gotten better. I mean, shit, through the first month of this season, Drickson Profar was probably the MVP of baseball, and he was on this team. So I think that, just comparing eras obviously is tough, because I think that the talent pool is always going to be a greater talent pool when you're talking about current teams rather than a team from the 60s. It's I don't know. Those Mets players, they were probably getting drunk in the dugout and smoking cigars and shit. So, to me, the Mets are the worst team, and they're the team I'm picking to advance.
I mean, the 23 Rockies do have a former MVP in their lineup, so there's that.
They do.
Kyle Freeland once finished top 3 in Cy Young voting. That happened.
Yep.
I mean, the 62 Mets picture is Al Jackson, Roger Craig, and they were both. Well, Al Jackson was in his 20s. Roger Craig was in his 30s.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I do, I understand it's tough to compare the eras, but even then, there's just
and I know
on this, the only guy on this 62 Mets team that was there when they were good in 69 was Ed Kranepool, and like you said, he had 6 at bats,
and he was not old enough to barely old enough to drive a car at this point.
Couldn't even go to war. He
couldn't even. He got drafted to the Mets. He couldn't even get drafted to the Army or whatever, military. So yeah, it's definitely a disparity in eras. But for me, the Mets had more losses in the time that they played against similar competition, as far as what exercise science was capable at that time for athletes. So yeah, I'm taking the I'm taking the
modern hitters getting to hit at the Polo Grounds, because that's where the Mets were in 62.
Oh yeah, that's always fun in MLB The Show, and to do when you play a good old Polo Grounds game. And you know what? Most modern players struggle to hit home runs and struggle to hit balls out of the park in that stadium too, at least from the video game.
Well, hitting them to dead center. Now down the lines.
Yeah, down the lines, you could get some. But yeah, a lot of perfects to dead center that just end up being, flyouts to the bullpen. But who you got advancing?
I think I have to have the 62 Mets advancing here, because again, we look at that Rockies lineup and it's okay. There are players that are wanted in the league right now. Plenty of teams would love to have Ryan McMahon.
I wanted McMahon at the trade deadline.
Yeah, and legitimately so. Jurickson Profar is a guy who's wanted still. So there's semblance of talent here.
Yeah, I do wonder what'll end up happening with Jurickson Profar as far as his contract goes, if he will
fascinating careers I can remember.
He was
the number one prospect at the same time Bryce and Trout were coming up. That's how good he was.
Yeah.
And then he basically missed 2 years with an injury. And then he was just a guy.
Yeah, he was.
And then found his form again.
Yeah, and then he kind of broke out this year, and I mean he picked a good year to do it, because he's going into free agency. He's an unrestricted free agent as of whenever this season ends. So it'll be interesting to see how much he gets paid, how many years he gets, what. How it'll be interesting to see what teams value this. Do teams look at this as kind of just a one-off this year, or do people think oh, maybe that he was just a late bloomer who finally turned a corner and maybe has a couple of good years still left in him? I mean, he is 32, so Father Time's working against him as well.
But I think you could go back and look at the pedigree and say, okay, he probably always had this in him. He just needed.
Yeah, he always had like the tools. There's a reason why he was such a highly touted prospect, and maybe it just took him. Maybe it just took him a while to figure it out.
Yeah, it wouldn't shock me if he played. I mean, I don't know if he wants to, but like if he just became a DH type. Like I know his value is he's a decent corner outfielder now. Like could play infield in a pinch if you really needed him to. But if he just wanted to say, hey, you know what? I'm still really good at this hitting thing and just wanted to be a DH, probably could play another 10 years.
Probably, yeah. Yeah, or like, I mean, he could play in the outfield too. So like, that gives you, left field, depending which team it is, like depending what stadium. I mean, shit, he'd be, if the price is right, he'd definitely be an upgrade from Verdugo. So like,
oh, that's frightening.
I wouldn't mind, replacing, that would be a solid replacement. So, and like Yankee Stadium left field is like easy enough to play. Like, shit, even Giancarlo Stanton, who every time Giancarlo Stanton did something, like Bob Costas just had to remind us that like he's slow. Like, yeah,
he's like a dog dying. That's what he was describing.
It's like, we have eyes and we are watching this baseball game. Like we see it, bro. And like, we also saw like the home runs he hit. And just like how, we also saw that and like just how like hard he can hit baseball. So you take the good with the bad. But even he was able to play left field for a little bit for the Yankees. So like Yankee Stadium left field, like isn't too hard to play. So I think there's definitely a landing spot for Profar somewhere out there. Maybe he stays with the Padres. Who knows? But moving on to the final matchup of this portion of the programming for the Nope season, and the final matchup of the NLDS for the series. We have a couple of legendary bad teams from the early 2000s. We have the 2002 Milwaukee Brewers and the 2004 Arizona Diamondbacks. The Diamondbacks at this point were 3 years removed from crushing Yankee fans' hopes and dreams of a 4th straight World Series. And then you had the Brewers.
Sure the terrorists didn't win. Anyway,
yes, the terrorists did win, but
no, I said didn't.
Oh, I mean, I disagree, personally. So touchy.
I heard someone say this once, and I thought it was pretty smart. Someone said the Yankees won that series 3-4. I thought that was a good way to describe it.
Yeah,
they won in New York. That's what you really want, and they won them the way they did. Like,
yeah. For what was going on at the time, and a city and a nation healing. At least you got those games at home in pretty epic fashion.
Like a warrior. You went out on your shield. There's honor in that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'll never look at it as the Yankees won that series 3-4. I mean, that is pretty funny. I'll never look at it that way, but I can appreciate the sentiment, and yeah, I mean, goddamn, but yeah. So this team, obviously, a lot of the members of that team, got older, and the team disbanded. So. They still had Randy Johnson on this team. This was his last year as Diamondbacks pitcher. He had I think Randy Johnson pitched a perfect game in 2004. Yeah. And he had a 2.6 ERA. Did he win the Eric Gagne won the 2004 Cy Young, right?
I think Gagne won 2003.
Oh, 2003 was the year he
yeah.
got like, well, it was like
So
one year into
Randy
another.
Johnson finished second in Cy Young voting that year. I just got it pulled up.
Roger
Clemens won it.
Yeah, Roger Clemens won the 04 Cy Young.
Yeah, so not only did it have Randy Johnson, Brandon Webb, I think this was his rookie year. No, it was year 2. But like signs of the Brandon Webb he became. I know he won 7 and 16. He had an ERA of 3.5. That's pretty. An ERA plus of 128. That's pretty good.
Yeah, I will say, looking at like the pitching sections of like these historically bad teams while we've been doing this, and like seeing all like I don't think win-loss record, really holds much merit for pitching and like evaluating a pitcher. But it is just funny to see like some of these win-loss records for some of these pitchers. Like there's one guy in the 62 Mets who went like 10 and 24. Like
Roger Craig.
Yeah, like that's just funny. So yeah, looking at these two teams, it's a tough call. I mean, as far as as far as the Brewers go, they had Richie Sexson, 27-year-old Richie Sexson. He hit 29 home runs. He drove in 102, 867 OPS. He was pretty good. He was still definitely like in like the prime of his career at this point. You had Jose Hernandez, who had a 834 OPS and 24 home runs, 73 ribbies. You had Alex Sanchez on this team. He stole 33 bases and he stole 33 bases and he had a 701 OPS. So this team and Matt Stairs on it too. So like
Mark Loretta's in here.
Guys that could hit. What's that?
Yeah, Mark Loretta's on here. He was a future All-Star. Jeff Jenkins is in here.
This team has some guys who could hit. And then like even some of their pitchers were like Ben Sheets. Like he wasn't terrible.
I might have been rookie Ben Sheets.
Yeah, he was 23 years old.
He struck out 170. That's at 23 years old. That's pretty good.
Yeah, that's not too bad.
It's just now the rest of that rotation behind him.
Yikes! Yeah,
Jamie Wright, Ruben Cavito.
Yeah, this is a tough one. I feel like the Diamondbacks have the better pitching, but the Brewers have the better lineup, I feel.
Now, the Brewers have the better bullpen because like Mike DeJean was a guy that teams wanted for a long time. Ray King was a team, like every trade deadline, you were looking for that lefty guy for your playoff push. Ray King was a guy that was always getting picked up.
Yeah, Luis Vizcaíno and Valerio de los Santos.
And you look at the Diamondbacks bullpen, and it's Elmer Descends, Randy Choate, former Yankee.
More like Elmer descends into darkness and descends into blowing this series.
Jose Valverde through 29 games. We know what was down the road with Jose Valverde. So
yep. Yeah. So I think I'm gonna go.
Jenny Finch's husband.
Yeah, this is a tough one. I think I'll go with the Brewers winning and the Diamondbacks being the team to advance. And the tiebreaker to me is the bullpens because, Brewers have the better lineup and the Diamondbacks have the better starting pitching. But I think that the fact that the Brewers have a formidable bullpen, and if you are talking about a playoff series, a theoretical playoff series, especially a 5-game series like we've seen in these actual playoffs where bullpens are playing a big part in how these series swings. Like the Yankees, big reason why the Yankees advanced in their series, and I would imagine theoretically between two shitty teams it would go similarly, where the team that wins would probably be the team that gets more out of their bullpen, especially when you consider that on teams this bad, you're probably, aside from like Randy Johnson and Brandon Webb, you're probably not getting a whole lot of length from your starters. So, the Diamondbacks will win, the Brewers win the tiebreaker, and the 2004 Diamondbacks are my team to advance.
So I have the 2002 Brewers here because
thank God we needed at least one disagreement.
It's just because not only do you have Randy Johnson just exiting his last peak year, but also you have Brandon Webb behind him. So that's 2 out of the 5 game or 3. If you assume that this goes, if this goes the distance, Randy Johnson's starting 2 of those games. Brandon Webb is starting 1 of them. That's a big thing right there. And then you look at the Diamondbacks lineup. Luis Gonzalez with a 118 OPS plus. So, all right, he's not 2001 Luis Gonzalez, but 70% of what or 60% of what he was. 39-year-old Steve Finley with a 107 OPS plus. You have Shea Hillenbrand with a 104 OPS plus. He drove in 80 runs that year. Danny Bautista drove in 65. So there's and Richie Sexson did get traded to this team. Richie Sexson played 23 games for this team.
Richie Sexson was on both of these teams.
Yeah, that. I want to see when. Let me see when he got there. Let me check his transaction.
Yeah, it doesn't. I mean, the Brewers couldn't have hung on to him too much longer after 2002. I almost wonder if the Diamondbacks acquired him in 2002, like
December 1st, 2003.
So like the Diamondbacks at that point probably still felt like, all right, like 2001 was like 2 years ago. Like we could still get something out of this like group.
So he was
traded by Milwaukee, still in like a mindset of contending.
So he was traded with a player to be named later in Shane Nance to Arizona for Chris Capuano, Craig Counsell, Chad Moeller, Lyle Overbay, Jorge De La Rosa, and Junior Spivey.
Wow.
And he was only there for 1 year. That seems like kind of a gross overpay.
Yeah. I guess the Diamondbacks were like trying to go all in.
Because they made the playoffs in 2002, and I forget what their record was in 2003. Like maybe they just missed. They were 84-78 the year before. So this was them trying to keep
in 2003. Maybe they had the foresight to kind of know like 2003. Maybe they had the foresight to kind of know like this is like our last chance to kind of add to like our postseason resume before like we'll have to rebuild again as like a fairly young expansion team at this point.
Let me see. I don't know if Randy Johnson got traded or if he signed as a free agent with the Yankees.
I'm pretty positive he signed, and he definitely signed in 2005.
No, it was a trade.
It was
traded to the Yankees for Brad Halsey, Deoner Navarro, Javi Vasquez, and cash.
Javi Vasquez and cash. You gotta love it. Yeah, we traded for Javier Vasquez after the 2003 season because we felt.
I remember.
We felt like we needed some more. Pitching, and we also traded for Kevin Brown. Neither of those acquisitions really worked. Well, Javier Vasquez was like lights out for the first half of the season, and then he fell off a cliff in the second half, and he got he got like beat up on in the playoffs, and then like the Yankee fans like ran him out of town. I think like their solution to that was like, let's try and get Randy Johnson, even though he was like in his 40s at this point. The solution was to get 41-year-old Randy Johnson, and that was when that was the year he finally started to look his age. Yeah, and my mistake, I thought that he was a free agent signing. When you said trade, I was thinking like a deadline acquisition. I was like, well, we definitely didn't get him like at the deadline. Like it was definitely an off-season acquisition. So I kind of assumed that we had signed them. But yeah, I forget that.
And then in January 2007, traded back to Arizona for Alberto Gonzalez, Steven Jackson, Ross Ollendorf, and Luis Vizcaino. Not great when Ross Ollendorf was the best returning piece in the tree.
There's a lot of there's like a lot of immaculate grid, like roster turnover between these two teams, where there's like a lot of players like that. Number one played for both of the actual teams in this series, like same year, but a lot of players that also played for both franchises, like Luis Vizcaíno and Richie Sexton, and the list goes on. But yeah, so we don't agree on this one, which means that it's going to go to a poll. So be on the lookout for that. We are going to need you, the people, to decide who advances in this series. Will it be the 2002 Diamondbacks or the 2002 Brewers or the 2004 Diamondbacks? The people agreed with Jerry for the first poll that we did between the 2023 Rockies and the 010 Pirates. I do wonder if
no, you won that. I think you had the Rockies advancing. I think I had the.
No, I thought it was the other way around.
Maybe it was.
Maybe I thought I picked the Pirates as the worst team, but I mean we'll check. We could check the tape on that one. But maybe you're right. We'll have to check the receipts, check the tape to see see who who had it right. But either way, the Rockies won. The Rockies were the worst team that ended up advancing. But yeah, this one's going to a poll, and so be sure to vote in it. Be sure to subscribe to the Middle Initial Podcast YouTube. Subscribe to our motherfucking YouTube. Follow the Ascension Podcast Network. Follow all our socials, the handles down below. That's going to do it for this episode of Black Diamond. We will see you next time, and hopefully we are, or hopefully we are not, previewing a Subway World Series. Peace.